And good afternoon. It was almost still morning when I hit record. And happy holidays to all. Got my favorite tree in the background there.
Thank
This is
you.
this is the oh, that thumbs. Every time I move my hand, the thing does. Let me do thumbs up. Come on. I don't know why it doesn't do thumbs up when I put it up. Anyway, back here, that's the years ago, Barnes and Noble was selling these trees, and ever since then, every year when I offered my daughter, I don't know why this thing keeps putting thumbs down. uh, uh, my daughter and I offer, how about we get a real tree? You know, go out and get one with the wood and everything. No, pink tree, pink tree. So, so this is the one, and I bring it to the store. Then I get to use it every day, and it warms my heart because I put a lot of her handmade ornaments that she used to put on there. And of course, last night started the first night of Hanukkah, so I've got my
Oh,
dreidels. we've we've got a little bit of an intertwined household at my house. But anyway, I'm going to start off with a song. I'm going to play it here. And then I'll finish it when I'm done with the class. I'll play it again over here, and I won't play it the whole thing, but I figured I'd open up with a fun song since it's getting pretty close to
sure.
that time of the year. Woohoo! Thank you so much. Hold the applause. All right, that was just using the song setup, by the way, that the Lowrey organ has built in. Hi, Sue. You came. You weren't there a little while ago. Nice to see you. Happy holidays. But that was the song setup using it, and it's a slightly different over here as far as the rhythm style, by the way. So I'll play a little bit towards the end. What I like to do today is I was looking back, I've keep track of kind of a lot of the things that I teach, and at some point, I know some of it's going to be recycled, repeated, which is okay because we learn by repetition. And the other thing is that over time, there are a lot of newer students that get involved in these style of instruments that maybe they haven't had something like that. So today it'll either be a pretty good review or it'll be something new for you. I don't know why my camera keeps putting that. Do you see that thumbs down thing popping up? I don't know why it keeps doing that. I thought it was like a hand gesture, so I don't know. There's got to be a way to turn that off. I want to get thumbs up, thumbs up. All right, so what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about these fabulous things called rhythm presets or style setups, okay? Now I say it that way because you all have on your Lowrey organ, you have one or the other. And the difference as far as what it's supposed to do, there is no difference in what it's supposed to do, but there is a little bit of a difference as what happens when you use it. So years ago, you got a little history lesson here. And write this down because I might pop quiz you. You never know. But back in 1990, when the Lowrey organs, what was called the N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, NT series of models were introduced, it was the first time that Lowrey introduced the feature called Rhythm Preset. And that was a huge deal because before that, if you had a Lowrey organ and you put on big band or country, or they got a lot of the models that were out before it were called the Genius series, the G series. There was the model numbers were G100, G200, G300, et cetera, et cetera. But on that was a pretty big deal because the style, the music styles on those organs were a little bit more lifelike. Now, mind you, this was back in what we call the analog days. So a piano wasn't a piano, a clarinet wasn't a clarinet, but they had pretty good technology to make it sound pretty close to that. But what was significant on those models were the styles of music sounded more like the style of music. So if you go further back in time on Lowrey organs, not just Lowrey, many organs, if you put on a country rhythm, you hear a drum beat, a piano or guitar type sound, and a bass pattern. And then if you put on polka, the polka would play like a polka beat, but you'd have the same music instrumentation in the background. So imagine going to a concert somewhere, and they say, we're going to play polka music, we're going to play big band music, we're going to play country music, we're going to play Latin music, all right? We're going to play all these different styles of music. And all you see up on stage is a drummer, a guitar player, a piano player, and a bass player, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Now, what would happen is the pattern in which they drum and the beat would be those styles of music, but the instrumentation in the background would all sound the same. So back when that Genius series, there was a big joke in the industry I heard that they said you had to be a genius to operate a Lowrey organ then. But when that series of organs came out, when you put on a Dixieland, you heard your trumpets, your clarinets, your saxophones, the banjos that you would hear in Dixieland music. And then if you put one of those big band rhythms on, you'd hear the horns and the sounds that a big band would have. But there was a downside to that series of instrument, just probably because they didn't think of it yet or they didn't have the technology yet. But if I put on big band, the band sounded pretty good, like a big band. But what sounds would you use with a big band? Well, a lot of people are going to ramble off some of the things I said. And so what you would have to do is sit down, put your big band, where it was at, and then you'd have to go and set it up yourself. Imagine that. And then if you listen to it and said, oh, that bass is too loud, then you have to adjust the bass. I don't think I like that. You had to set everything up. So in 1990, when the NT series was introduced, I'm going to start here and work my way over. When the NT series was introduced, all right, there was a famous button, and it's kind of, we're a little spoiled by it now, of course, because many of you have it. But in 1990, Lowrey introduced a button called Rhythm Preset. And that was pretty spectacular. So when you put on big band, and you had Rhythm Preset, and actually the presets were in between the keyboards. That's where they used to have them. And the theory there was that if you're playing, it might be easier to kind of push the buttons here instead of having to lift up. And then some people, then they eventually moved them to the top. And there's some people that remember those models. They say, I wish they were in the between because I still kind of like it. So it's kind of one of those debates that just depends on who you're talking to. But anyway, those were standard presets. But up here, there was a button called Rhythm Preset, and there was one. So if you put on big band, you got a Rhythm Preset. And it might have set up saxophones and what have you. And if you put on a country style, It might have put on a piano, guitar, instrumentation that pertains to that style of music. But guess what? There was just one rhythm preset. That was it. So if you put on a rhythm and you put on rhythm preset and you wanted more sounds for big band, you had to go over to the right side, which that hasn't changed, and find the sounds that you wanted. And then the next generation came out, and that they introduced a model with 1, 2, and 3 rhythm presets. And boy, we were selling the heck out of organs because it had 3. Woo! Now, when I tell people like that have these types of models that you have, they go, "How'd you sell organs with just 3 rhythm presets?" Well, that back then was a big deal. So when the new generation came, the first model was called the Lowrey Royale. Some of you might have heard it, may have owned one at one time. And that was the first time they introduced the concept of rhythm presets, where your 10 presets in the middle, or 8, depending on what style of organ you have. You had one rhythm preset, okay? And then the 10 buttons, okay? As long as rhythm preset was selected, you'd get 10 different sounds and setups for whatever style that you chose, okay? Now, after today, I don't know what you're going to do with this knowledge, this little lesson. But if you're ever talking to somebody about a Lowrey organ, you could say, "Oh yeah, I know all the whole history." But anyway, so I put on any style of music, and you have a rhythm preset button, and there's a terminology you might hear say from time to time. It may not be new to some of you, it might be new to some of you, and it's called 0 position. Okay? Now, I don't know, from what I can remember and seen, I don't know that I see 0 anywhere written in any of the manuals. But it does exist. They don't refer to it as 0. But over the years, the Lowrey representatives, ourselves, we always refer to it as 0 position. Okay? And what that means is when you have a rhythm preset button selected, okay, and no number on, and let's say I put on, well, put on a country style. Let me put on, what does this say? Texas toe tapper, okay? If I have rhythm preset on and a rhythm selected, keep in mind, rhythm preset only changes the sounds as long as you have a rhythm selected, okay? No number is pressed, then you are in 0 position. Okay? And that rhythm preset is the most, what would be considered the most ideal setup for the organ if I had, in this case, Texas toe tapper. And another way to put it is the most ideal setup if I only had one rhythm preset. What would be the most ideal setup for that? Okay? Then Lowrey made it so that as long as rhythm preset was selected and you used your 10 presets, it changed the upper and lower right keyboard 10 additional ways based on that one style. So the message here is that do whatever number of rhythm styles you have on your organ. If you have a rhythm preset, okay, I'll get to normal and organ in a minute, and you have 10 plus normal is 11. So that's 11 different setups for every rhythm style that you have. So when the Royale was introduced, there were 168 rhythms on that model. That means I had 11 different setups for every one of those styles. Now, in this case, I have country, and within one country button, there's 8, 9, 10 different country styles. There are going to be some overlapping in some of the styles. You know, it's not going to be so totally different. That's, you know, that's over 1,600 presets. I don't know that Bill Curry, when he designed them, would ever get the organ done if he had to create that many totally different setups. Now, they are different in the fact that a lot of times the setup, the balances are done for you. The drum volumes also done. The background, the auto bass, the accompaniment. When I go to one preset using that, the sound changes, so does the balance of the band. If it's a softer sound, then maybe the band was preset to be a little softer. Okay? Now, keep in mind, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people that had Lowrey organs over the years, not everybody's going to agree on what is the right balance. Have you ever had a preset that you played and you went, I could barely hear this sound, or this is too loud? Everybody's ears are different. It's never, but the way they're programmed is a program to the industry standard. For example, last week I walked out of the store here and I was going out to my car and there was a car driving by. The windows were, they were closed all the way up, but all I could hear is boom, 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 bass. The person that was playing their music loved the bass, so he probably cranked up the bass equalizer. And then everybody's different. I've been to certain households with two members in the household. One spouse starts to play and she likes to turn up the bass. And then the other spouse likes to play and they turn down the bass. Because our hearing changes over the years. Sometimes we lose certain frequencies that we normally used to be able to hear. I had a student, the story I like to tell many times, I had a student that got a Lowrey Stardust. This was quite some time ago. And he came into the store after he had it delivered and insisted that his organ was broken. These notes weren't playing down here. So I went out to his house and I said, show me what you're doing. So I put on the rhythm and I started to play. And he said, yeah, I can hear it. Yeah, see right there, it doesn't work. This last octave doesn't work. And I said, no, it works. You can't hear that? And he didn't believe me. So he called out his wife, Mary. And she comes walking out and he said, play it again. So I started playing and then I got higher and she had this look of angst, like stop. Well, here's the setup that I had. Are you ready? Let's put on this. Let's put on this. Okay, so I was playing along. And then I went down to here. Got pretty high there. That's a piccolo, and you get higher. And what happened was he discovered that range in his hearing was not very good, and he could not hear those highs. Anyway, sort of getting off track, but let me come back. But all is related. So Rhythm Preset, Bill Curry, when he programmed all those sounds and presets, he does it based on an industry standard. It's not always going to mean your ears agrees with the industry standard, okay? And so if you put on your presets and you get these sound changes, depending on the sound that's there, there's alterations in the band along with the volumes as well. Now, some of you have a normal rhythm preset and an organ rhythm preset, okay? I'm going to come back to that, but just keep that in mind. If you have the E series being even our mid-sized Lowrey Journey Fanfare, Inspire, Rialto, EX Marquis, Grand Marquis, Aria, all those models, you have something that's similarly labeled, but there's a little change. And that is, instead of calling them rhythm presets, Lowrey referred to them as style setups. Okay? Now, operationally speaking, it functions the same way. In other words, I put on a rhythm. As long as I have that button pressed, these sounds are going to change based on the rhythm. Okay? However, on the EX models, when I jump over here, I'll give you a little heads up now, you have what's called a normal style setup. Normal style setup is not the same as normal rhythm preset on the A platform. Okay? Normal style setup on the E is the new presets that Bill programmed into those organs. Okay? However, Lowrey knew, like me too, when I sit down and I play this model, you know, when I use Frank and the Count as a test, I always have like three or four presets as my go-to. The 0, 1, and 2 have guitar, and number 6. Those are like my go-to presets when I use Frank and the Count. If I come over here and I play on the EX and I want those sounds and they're not there, I would be a little bit upset. Darn it, where are those setups? So Lowrey did not get rid of those presets. So on the EX models, and for those of you who hear this terminology, you'll know, depending on which model you have, there's a button called Vintage. So Vintage on the EX is what Rhythm Preset was on the A and the SU. And Vintage, I think they just didn't want to use they didn't want to put a button say the older presets. They're really not older, they're just different. That was the start of it. And those are great presets. And so on here, Lowrey decided to keep all of those. If you're using the same rhythms that are on here and you put on the vintage mode, it's like having normal rhythm preset here. And I say that because I know many of you join us online for various classes. Dawn teaches the classes, Joni does, Carrie does stuff from time to time. If we say things like normal rhythm preset, it's the equivalent to vintage style setup on the E platform. And vice versa. If we're on one of these models and we say, I'm using swing band or easy 4/4 rhythm and vintage style setup number 3, then you can make a note and go, oh, I have a symphony or prestige. That would be normal rhythm preset number 3. Okay? And it's good to ask us if you kind of forget it or for whatever, it's okay to ask us from time to time. If you knew everything about your organ, we probably wouldn't have anything to do. So we don't mind if you forget stuff. All right, now let me go back to the Royale, okay? Because this may be worth the class today. So when the Royale was introduced, it was the first time that they introduced this rhythm preset concept where these 10 buttons will do multiple things. Because before that, if you use these 10 buttons, they gave you what was called the general presets. You had organ, pipe organ, theater organ, strings, etc. And the only time they change is if you use these category presets. Okay? So the Royale, when it was introduced, they took that same concept and said, let's use it with the rhythm preset. And it was the first time that they introduced that. But Bill was pretty clever, or Lowrey, or whoever was the team that, I know he did all of the work, but whoever made this decision, I think was very clever. They had a systematical way of what these presets did. And over the years, they've made it to where it's easy for the player to know what's happening in these presets. But I'm going to share something with you. Some of you may have seen it. May be kind of a deja vu that I think it's worth having. Okay? When I'm playing and I'm using this organ, even though the presets on the screen tell me, you know, piano or something, I know that while I'm using rhythm preset or vintage style setup or even the new ones, I know that I have an idea what's going to happen when I press 10. Now, I don't know specifically, but I have an idea what type of sounds I'm going to get. Big. I know what type of sound I'm going to get number 3. Like if I want an organ sound, real quickly, right off the bat, I just know if I have rhythm preset on, if I push number 3, I'm always going to get an organ sound. And I know this because this concept was around for a very long time, okay, until they changed it to where they told everybody specifically. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to screen share this. You can take a picture. And when I post this, I've posted this many times over the last several years. But it's good to know. All right. You see that there? It says easy a little more. Just a nod by somebody or a thumbs up. Okay, Jim nodded his head yes. All right. So when Lowrey introduced the rhythm preset concept, what they did was when I put on any rhythm style, like I said, I gave you big band, country, Latin. Those are 3 totally different styles of music, right? The presets are programmed as long as rhythm preset is on to give you these type of sounds. These types of sounds are going to also be determined based on the style of music. Okay? Now I'm going to skip 1 and 2 and come back to that. So as long as I have a rhythm selected, and I have rhythm preset or vintage style setup for the E models, number 3, I'm going to get an organ sound. Now, what kind of organ sound am I going to get? Well, it depends on the rhythm. If you've got a big band and you turn around and you put on a waltz, there's a good chance that the big band will give you like a real nice jazz type organ sound to go with big band. And if you put on a waltz, you might get something a little more like a theater or something more mellow. And I push number 4, you get string or strums. And it says it right there. A lot of people misinterpret the word strings. Strings, and those are the examples. Guitars, banjos, symphonic strings, orchestral strings. Just depends on the style of music you're using. If you put on 5, it kind of just says it all right there. 6 is a tricky one because this answer can go multiple ways and can be applicable to the others. It says a solo instrument, and it's basically, and it's not always just a solo sound, I believe, from the blues, but it gives you a one sound instrument. In other words, you may not find a clarinet and a trumpet and a trombone combined. You'll get one type of instrument that will fit the style of music. Now look at number 8. It says piano. So piano, it's commonly also sometimes a percussion type of a sound. So for example, a xylophone is considered percussion. But very commonly, you'll find that if you have rhythm preset on and you put 8, you'll get some type of piano. Sometimes it's a piano with strings. Sometimes it's a piano with harmony. Sometimes it's piano with another piano and a 2-part harmony, which is very common. Number 6 says it's a solo. Sometimes you'll get a piano as a solo instrument. So that's why sometimes they kind of will do something similar for each other. But you may get just one type of piano sound versus 8 might do one, may do a combination. Sometimes it'll put on Floyd, Kramer effect. 8 will always give you some type of vocal. And 9 is considered an ensemble. They're a little fuller in the registrations. In the right hand, a lot of times there's harmony, not always. And then number 10 is finale. I just say it's big. Always something big. Okay, now if you go back to 1 and 2, remember earlier one says easy, and 2 says a little more. And it kind of explains it. An uncomplicated registration combining a simple background and a melody. That means if you have a big band rhythm on that has a lot going on in the band, if you put Rhythm Preset 1 on, you may hear less of those musicians in the background, and the sound that's in the melody will be something that's a little more subtle. I always say this, and this is what it says. 2 is a little more. It's just like it says. It's a little bit more on both keyboards from 1. It's like 1 plus a little bit more. Okay? So, now that I put that up there, here's an example. I'm going to put on a general, let's see here. I'll put on the, how about the Franken account that I had on there earlier. So, this is Franken account with the intro. All right. So there's your typical band, right? And right now it's got on 0, it's got the ideal setting for this. And in this case, what you heard earlier when I was doing the sound check, and I got a nice big organ sound. Count Basie. Okay. Now, I'm going to do number 1. In fact, I'll put up the screen that I had so you can see this. All right. Now watch what happens to the band when I press 1. Did you hear how the band changed? Just a guitar player with a drummer and a bass. Number 2 and 1 are very similar. Sometimes 2 is just a little bit more. But the band hasn't really changed that much. Number 3, organ. Now what you're seeing on the screen there, by the way, is referring to the upper keyboard. Now, you remember earlier when I was on Rhythm Preset 0, it came up with a big full organ sound. It's going to happen where sometimes you're going to hear a similar sound in more than one preset, but a little differently. When I opened it up, it was like this on 0. Now listen to number 3. Four, string or strum. Number 5, like a vibraphone. 6, solo. Trumpet, perfect. 7, vocal type sound. Now let's stop right there. You're not going to always get just a vocal. You may not always get just strings. You may not always just get an organ. Sometimes you'll get a combination of them. In this case, there's a vocal sound with a saxophone. That's a very clever combination. 8, piano, just a piano. 9, ensembles. 10. So having this, and over time, if you have that handout, or if you just took a picture of it or whatever, you just kind of have it nearby, it gives you the type of setup that you're going to get. It doesn't give you specifically. Now, in the Royale, when that organ was introduced, on the screen, if you were using Rhythm Preset, that's what came up on the screen. It was telling you what type of sound you're going to get on the upper keyboard. Over time, what happened when actually it was the Lowrey Palladium that introduced this. The Lowrey Palladium was the first organ to actually, instead of telling you what type of sound, it actually told you what sound you got on the top and what sound you got on the lower right. That's what most of you are used to. Okay? I know that because I know most of you have. But, and if you go through that, and it's kind of nice to have, because if you put on the screen there, you know, in this case, I'll put up, let's see, what screen do I have up here? Looks like I've got the marquee screen. Let me switch it. Okay, so right now I'm on Franken the Count. By your power button, a lot of you have the custom button, number 4. On the organs that don't have 4 custom buttons, it's traditionally number 3 or 2. Okay? I think the Inspires Rialto have 3. By default, by the factory, number 3 will pull up this option you're going to see. So I'm going to push custom 4 here. And as you can see, it's giving me, and you'll notice there's 0. You notice it doesn't say 0. You can call it 11, you can call it 0. The 11th preset, however you want to do that. Now if you can kind of read that, remember earlier I told you 1 was kind of like the ideal set. Organ Awe, by the way, that's a very popular sound that Dennis Awe would use in a lot of his concerts. Some of you had a chance to see him. Easy is like a jazz guitar. This is just telling you this type of sound. Easy, a little more. And when you were listening to that background, this is 0. Here's 1. Notice the band again. 2. The drummer changed a little bit. Now 3, let's listen to it. The band come back in. Now listen to number 4. By the way, Rhythm Preset or vintage style setup number 4, commonly, not all the time, but more than 90% of the time, will activate the drum variation. Now, it doesn't mean when you put on another preset, drum variation will come on. In this case, number 2 turned it on. In many of the other presets, it may or may not. But normal Rhythm Preset or vintage, number 4 is very common that the drum variation gets activated. And then as you go through them, all of those presets will change. Now, let's talk a little bit about organ rhythm preset. Now, organ rhythm preset is kind of an interesting thing because I've had many students over the years that loved using it because they love the organ sounds. And I've had some students, I'm not really, I don't like the sound of the organ. I mean, I can use it from time to time, but they stay away from it. But there's a little hidden gem with the organ rhythm preset, a couple hidden gems. Some of you may know this, but have forgotten because we don't talk about this a lot. Okay, so let me talk about the second one is the first hidden, really the one that a lot of people forget. Let me talk about the first one. So what organ rhythm preset does is the exact same thing that I've been telling you with normal rhythm preset. The difference is on the upper keyboard, all of the sounds have some type of organ sound naturally. But a lot of times they give you combinations. So for example, if I put on organ rhythm preset number 5 It may be just an organ, or it may give me an organ with vibes. It may, sometimes number 7 will give me an organ with a vocal sound combined together. Sometimes an organ sound with strings. So that what I screen shared, you could still use that, even though they're just organ sounds, it'll still give you a similar idea. But there's another, I'm headed somewhere with this, hidden gem number 1. So right now I have normal rhythm preset on with Frank and the Count. All right, now I'm going to switch on the organ. I'm going to push organ rhythm preset and see if you can see it change. Now if you see that there, in this one example, this says full B. How many of you heard of the Hammond B3? Hammond? Okay, Hammond had a very popular organ sound way back then, an organ called the B3 or B-type, and it had a very unique tone and tremolo that separated from all the other organ manufacturers. And that B is like saying it's like the full combination sound, okay? I'm going to the slash on the left. Pretty organ, 8 perk jazz. That means it's going to be an organ sound with like what they call a percussion effect, which means an organ sound that has a little bit of a strike to it, striking effect. Now, I'll play some of these. Jazz basic. Now look at this, full organ. Vibe an organ. Okay? I'm just going to go through them real quickly. The first one in 0, that's a very popular Hammond type sound. Wow, it's like they got the tremolos just right. Pretty organ. I'll do it without the rhythm so you can hear it. Pretty organ. Well, it's just that, isn't it? A pretty organ. 2, 8 perk jazz. And listen, you'll kind of hear it have almost like a clicky type of effect. Now here's pretty organ. They're very similar. Now hear the click. Jazz basic. Full organ. You notice the band is changing too. Go back to number 1. Remember easy? Listen to the band. It's an easy type of a band. 2, a little more, but in an organ setting. Now let's see if it gives me a drum variation on number 4. No drum variation, but I got full organ. Vibes and organ. B. Oh, almost another type of Hammond type effect. Scat plus an organ. Remember the vocal sound. Well, in this case, it's an organ, but they threw in a vocal with it. 7. Piano. They call it a Mysterio. 9, big finale. All out. Well, I think that'll speak for itself. Let's hear it. So even though they're all organ type sounds, he used a very similar layout as the screenshot that I put up for you. Now, you'll also notice, here's the hidden gem. 1. You'll also notice that even though all of the upper sounds are organ-based types of sounds, On the lower right, which is identifies with a slash and one to the right, you'll notice that in most cases they're not. They pull from the orchestral or the solo. Okay? So even though a lot of the sounds you heard had organ sounds, if I go to the top there, on the lower right keyboard, you'll notice you get 11 great other types of sounds other than the organ. There's an organ. So if you're kind of in that mode that you're playing along and you're saying to yourself, you know, I want to use all these presets, but for this song that I'm going to play, maybe I'm not quite in the mood for some organ sounds for the song. You have all these other presets that gives you other sounds. And if you're one that loves the sound of the organs, what a great place to go, because some of those combinations are really neat. They're not just organs. Sometimes an organ with a, I've had some presets where I put the organ with a preset on, and I get an organ combined with strings and then a touch of a vocal sound with it or choir, and it's just so gorgeous depending on the style. And your lower right. So that's hidden gem number 1, and I'm constantly mentioning it. Hidden gem number 2, and I'm going to come on over here, and this applies to both series, by the way. But this way, when I'm over here, when I pull up the screen, then I can go to the style setup very quickly. So I'm going to pick, I'm going to ask you, if you have your rhythm chart handy or somebody give me a rhythm. It doesn't matter which one you pick. I'll let you choose. Just pick a style of music.
Latin.
All right, so we'll go to the Latin. And when I go to the Latin button, what I'm going to do, there's 2 pages of Latins. And I will just ramble off a few, and then you tell me where to stop or which one you want to hear. I got Ballroom Latin, Rumba Beguine, or even better yet, here's what I'll do. Here's what I'll do. I'll just put it up on the screen. Inez, since you called out Latin, you have to pick one from this list. Wait, let me pull it up.
I like habanero.
Wait, hold on a second. I got the wrong screen up here. Okay. You like habanero?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get this up here anyway. I got to get this top. I'll put full. I don't know if you could see full. Let's see. I'll put screen. How about top right? Okay. So I'll select habanero. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to put on vintage rhythm preset. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I've got the habanero, vintage rhythm, which is the same as normal rhythm preset. And let me get this camera back here. By the way, I'm going to buy something that hopefully it works, that's supposed to project that directly to the computer, so maybe it won't be so fuzzy when I use this camera. Okay. So here's just a vintage style setup or normal rhythm preset. Just putting on a rhythm, letting it play. Okay, you hear the band? By the way, that rhythm style works perfect with this. But that's not the point of this. So listen to the band there, all right? All right. Now let's put on normal style setup, which is what normal style setup does is the same thing as normal rhythm preset here. You get 11 different setups for every style, okay? They're just going to be different. And what I discovered is, I haven't gone through all of them, but a lot of them work the same way. But you're not going to get the same sound as the vintage, okay? So in other words, it'll be a little more easy. You'll get an organ type sound, string. That same concept works. But listen to the band. I'm going to put it on the introduction. Okay, that sounds the same. Let me put on vintage. Let's see. So far, the band sounds the same, right? Now let me try this here and see what happens. Listen closely. Can you hear a difference?
Mm-hmm.
The band members changed.
Yeah.
Okay? Sometimes I get this as a call thinking there's something wrong with the organ, then there isn't. They say, you know, I was put on habanera, or I was putting on jumpin' jazz, and I was playing along. And I kind of like that, and then I was using a button, and then I did this, and then all of a sudden, the band members didn't sound the same anymore. All right. So the hidden gem is this. And this started, by the way, I believe it was, I might be incorrect, but I'm almost positive, on the organ called the Lowrey Imperial. When that model was introduced, this concept started on that model. And when you have organ rhythm preset or organ style setup 0 position, meaning no number pressed, what'll happen is the band members you hear in the background that you normally hear, they get replaced with organ players. So imagine you're a professional musician and you play or you're a singer, and you have your drummer and your bass player, and then you have all the musicians in a big band orchestra, you know, horns, section, the saxes, and whatever. And all of a sudden, all the band members, they go on strike. Something happens. And now you don't have those musicians anymore. And I got a concert to sing tonight. I need something. And then you run into a few organ players, and they're really good. And you say, I'll tell you what, I'll hire you 3 organ players or 4 organ players, but I need you to play all the parts that the horn players would play. I don't know if it's a good analogy, but I mean, that's what happens, is all of the musicians in the band get replaced with a different type of organ sound. The notes are the same, but the sound is different. So here is jumpin' jazz with vintage or normal setup or rhythm preset. Listen to the band. Now if I put on organ rhythm preset or organ style setup, exact same thing, watch what happens. And the fills, everything. all of the fills, everything that's happening will be replaced with the organ. Put on, here's a popular rhythm way back. I will sometimes do it with this style, because this style's kind of depends on my mood. Sometimes I'm not in the mood for this big, bright, brassy, this is called the opener, the Broadway. There's a lot going on there, right? And they're sometimes a little on the bright side. If I put on the exact same rhythm, organ rhythm preset or organ style setup, now listen. And the fill. You could have so much fun with this. Here's a style some of you might be familiar with. This has been around for a while. It's a beautiful style either way. But, you know, the classic introduction opening to Unforgettable, Unforgotten. See if I remember how to play this. Wait a minute. Hear the strings? All right. So those, you got the strings in there. Now let me put on organ rhythm preset. Now watch. So instead of all of the strings doing the fills or the saxophones and so forth, the organ players are. But here's the phone call that I get from time to time. Robert, I love that. That's a cool thing that I have. I didn't realize I had it. I had this organ for years and didn't realize it. But I put on organ rhythm preset, listen to the band, and the minute I change to another preset, doesn't matter if I'm on organ rhythm preset still or not. Now all of the musicians that were replaced came back. I guess they got jealous and said, no, we can't have organ players doing our part. So how do I keep those, if I want to keep the organ background? Okay, it's a real simple thing. Some of you probably use this for other reasons, but this is how I would use it. So for example, when I was playing the original one, I love that saxophone sound there. So here's what you do. You ready? Put on organ rhythm preset 0, and just make sure you have it. You hear the organ players. All right, so they're there. And all you have to do is go to your locks and put in the accompaniment lock. Okay? Now there's multiple ways of doing it depending on the organ. So on this model here, there is one button next to the window that says lock. Like I got my tripod on lock. Right here, it says lock. It might be in the same place on the various models. On the Lowrey Prestige, I believe the Lowrey Imperial is in the same place. Yes, it is. On the Lowrey Prestige, it's actually on the left side, and there are 4 buttons. One says tempo or accompaniment, harmony, and control. Okay. On here, when I push the lock button, it gives me the, control, accompaniment, harmony, and transpose. Okay? And on the Prestige, they're grouped here. On the SU, I believe they're in here somewhere. And then on some of the models, there's an actual tempo lock button. On here, to lock the tempo, you push the two tempo buttons together. But that's not a point of this conversation. All right? Now, if you look up on the screen, on the EX model, it's over here, and there's one button. Okay? And when you press it, you get the similar options that you would on what I just mentioned. Okay? Control, accompaniment, and transpose. Okay? Accompaniment. So when you lock that, what happens is this. So I'm going to put on that rhythm stop. It locks what it says it's going to lock. So if you like the organ rhythm preset, you got to remember though, if you're going to go to another rhythm and use the organ rhythm preset, you may want to deactivate it because the organ sound's not going to be the same organ sound on every rhythm. When I went to the Franken account, as an example, let me turn off the lock real quick just so you see this, hear this. Here's Franken account. Here's how it normally sounds. Okay, here's that same intro with organ rhythm preset. Okay, now watch what happens when I put on Unforgotten. Unforgotten. Here's how it normally sounds. Now here's organ rhythm preset here. They're going to be different organ sounds. You're not going to get that big, full jazzy organ sound with a soft rhythm like that. So if you lock it, if I put the accompaniment lock now, and I lock it, now when I change presets, any preset that I go to, the band will remain. I'm going to go to the one that I like. Change preset. So you'll notice that the band stays with the organ sound, and then I can use my normal rhythm I don't have to stick to organ rhythm presets. I can go organ rhythm preset, vintage, normal, whatever you have, and you can still have that organ. Organ players are great for accompaniment music sometimes. Now I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to switch to Franken account. Now let's listen to Franken account. Ready? Oh, organ rhythm preset. Organ rhythm preset. Here we go. Let me go back to Unforgotten, a bit where I was earlier. Da, da. Organ rhythm preset. Let's get it to where we can hear it. Oh, that's intro 2. That's pretty fancy. Okay, there's that organ. So here's 1. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and lock that accompaniment. Okay, now what I'm going to do is switch to Franken account and put on my intro, and let's see what we got. So you notice that the organ player, oops, you'll notice that the organ player changed, okay? But in order to lock that organ within that group of presets, just make sure you have your accompaniment lock on. So I'm going to put on Franken account with organ rhythm preset, and then I'm going to lock the accompaniment. Okay? Let's see. Standards, Franken account, organ rhythm preset. Here we go. Now I'm going to lock it. lock, push the right button. Now watch. Go preset change. And it locks that organ background within that group of presets. That make sense? So I'm going back to your habanera, same thing. You could have some fun with that. Put on organ rhythm preset. Let's turn off the lock. Let's hear it without, or with, sorry. Oh, yeah, with it. Accompaniment log. Change preset. And the background remains. Pretty clever, huh?
Robert,
Yes.
actually on the on this, then you have 4 setups because you have normal, you have vintage. If you push both, you have organ. If you don't push any, you have general.
You do, but here's something to keep in mind with general presets. Remember earlier when I said style setup or normal rhythm preset or organ rhythm preset, it changes the sound on the top and the bottom keyboard every time you pick a different rhythm.
Right.
Okay? So if I put whatever I just pushed,
Yep.
and I go through here, okay, now let me pick something else. Notice the sounds are changing every time I pick a different rhythm. If I turn those off and I have what's called the general presets, if this is off and I use 1 through 10, this is the sound that I get for number 1, 2, 3, 4. Now watch this. I'm going to hit a different rhythm. Country. Here's 1, 2, 3. You notice the sound is exactly the same.
Yes.
Because general presets, when these aren't activated, okay, general presets is a group of 10 sounds that don't change regardless of what rhythm you're pushing.
Oh, okay.
So these
Right.
will constantly change
Yeah.
as long as one of those 3 or 2 options, depending on the organ I have, and every time I pick a different rhythm.
Got it.
Okay?
Yep. Thanks.
All right. So hopefully, every time I talk about this, sometimes I'll see people that I know I taught this organ rhythm preset, and they go, wow, I never knew that. And then 6 months later, wow, I didn't know I could do that. Because it's not something that we use a lot. And I'll admit, I don't use that option a lot. Every now and then I do. Sometimes I'm in the mood, I just bring in the organ players. And so you could have some fun with that. Okay? All right. So as promised, I told you I'd close off with, I think what I'm going to do, and by the way, you can, I'm going to do it in this number. I'm going to use the song setup for Auld Lang Syne. And then as I'm playing, I'm going to use the rhythm preset. Okay? And I'll put on the organ 0. So the band will change. You can do it midway. And I want those musicians to stay, okay, when I change it to the organ. So what I'm going to do is reach up and hit my lock and then hit accompaniment lock. So as I change to some of the presets, the organ player is still saying. And then what I'm going to do is turn off the accompaniment lock and then hit another preset, and it'll bring it back to the band. It may sound good. I may like it. I may not. That's why you experiment, to find out what you like and you don't like. So I'm going to,
I have one question.
yeah.
Do you use the lock feature a lot?
I do.
Okay.
I especially use the accompaniment lock.
Yeah.
Accompaniment
Jonathan
lock.
didn't
accompaniment locks just that. Everything that's related to, and next week's class, I might go into some of the other locks and do a kind of a recap of the accompaniment lock. So stay tuned in for that. But accompaniment lock, in short, locks everything that's related to the accompaniment. Okay?
Right.
So for example, when you have a rhythm on, the drummer is part of the accompaniment. The bass player is part of the accompaniment. Your Genie and Orchestra Plus is part of the accompaniment. The automatic bass is. Here's what else is part of the accompaniment. The alter style. Your left hand chord. Your left hand. That's accompaniment. Years ago, when you played the organs, they didn't have these fancy rhythms. How did they have an accompaniment? The organist was their own accompaniment.
When you end the song, does it default back?
What's that?
When you end the song, does it default back?
If you turn off accompaniment
I mean,
lock, yeah.
Oh, you have to turn it off.
Yeah,
manually.
but
Oh,
it'll lock all the controls for that. But what it
Oh.
won't do,
Oh,
what it
of
won't
course.
do is this. If I have a Franken account on, like I did, and I had muted trumpets, horn, saxophone, and I lock accompaniment, okay? If I switch to a Latin, it's not going to lock those musicians for the Latin.
Oh.
It'll just lock the balances. So it was programmed so it doesn't keep the same musicians for everything. It's only when you're using that group.
Oh.
So when I was using Franken account with the organ rhythm preset, it locked the organ players. As long as I was in Franken account, it would be that same organist playing.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Thank
All right, so, and here's Auld Lang Syne. I'm going to do it again. I might goof it up because I'm going to be experimenting as I go. This is the initial setup. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my locks. And so when I'm ready to switch to organ rhythm preset, I'll just activate it and continue using it. Here we go. Take two. That was it pulls up the candelabra, by the way, on that. Over here, it brings up the serenade style, and it takes out the Glenn Miller horns that was very popular in that style. This uses the Liberace candelabra. I'll start off with what it gives me first. Organ rhythm preset. I'm going to lock it. Off the accompaniment lock. And a rhythm preset. Now, by the way, while I was playing, I don't know if you heard it, but when I did the song setup, what it came up with was called the All Ein. The sounds that I got on the top and the bottom was what he labeled it Lombardo sax, which you could kind of hear that saxophone with that tremolo. And I liked that sound, and I wanted to use it with the organ background. So when I locked the accompaniment, I went back to song setup and selected it while I was playing. The background didn't change, but the sounds did. So you can kind of, that's the advantage of using that accompaniment lock. Okay, so there are a lot of cool things. All right, well, you know, it's interesting. When I was preparing some of my notes in my head and jotting down, I thought, boy, this is not going to take me but 20 minutes to discuss this rhythm preset thing. I always say that one of these days I'm going to give a 30-minute class and do a 30-minute class. So, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed the class. One other thing I want to mention, tell your friends, if you have an organ you can't trade up to anything because we don't have something to trade up. Tell your friends we are having one of the biggest inventory sales in the history of our company. You may have seen a flyer that came out that looked something like this. It said we are having our year-end inventory liquidation. We got some doorbusters. We've got all sorts of great opportunities for customers. People ever wanted a Prestige? We have a few of these in stock that we're doing something really spectacular with. Obviously, a lot of what actually, virtually 95% of what I talked about today applies to most of these models in the SUs and the A models that we talked about. If you have a friend or someone you think that's been considering getting involved in the hobby, this Easy 4, which we typically sell for the 7,000 range, we have a really great opportunity. And then right around this time of the year, we always we look at our inventory and make a decision as what do we have to do to reduce our inventory. So anyway, we have a we got going to the end of the year. I think the next time I do this class will be next year. So with that said, if I don't talk to you, if I don't communicate with you or talk to you, stay safe as always. Keep playing music every day. And see you next year.
Okay.
Thank you,
Bye.
Robert.
Thank you, Robert. That was a
All
great
right.
class.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to all of
Happy
you
New
as
Year.
well. Bye-bye.
Bye.